welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. I'm already spinning my words. Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Glad that you are joining us, and glad that my good friend Dr. Ted McElroy is joining us. I got to spend some time with Ted in person. What was it, Ted? 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, roughly.
Somewhere in there?
It seems like it's been forever too. It's weird.
And I remember as a kid, my parents saying time flies and thinking they were crazy because it took forever to get my birthday and Christmas and the next weekend and school break, and now I understand time flies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of the, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it certainly is coming with additional birthdays. But at that meeting, Ted, and I don't quite remember how the conversation started. Do you?
I was thinking about this too. I know there was something that was happening on stage at the Leadership Summit, and you were actually on stage. It was right after you had hobbled your way up to the stage after did you fracture actually? Did you fracture your ankle, or was it just sprained?
They called it an aversion fracture.
Okay.
So they treated it like a stage 3 sprain.
All right, so you had hobbled your way up to the stage and got on stage, and we had all, marveled at how strong you were and how you weren't wincing too badly. But I think it was somewhere in the discussion of what do you remember what your topic you were talking about? Because that was what spurred me to text you this particular
Yes, I was
quote.
talking about planning large scale meetings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Statewide or big regional
Right.
meetings that they could put on, and we all have an expectation of how they're going to be and work, and I was talking about the need to really plan and drive in the details and the budget. And I think I used the phrase, because I love this phrase, that you don't get what you expect, you get what you accept.
Right.
And so setting your level of what you're going to accept.
Yeah. So I sent to you a quote, and you actually attribute it to Deming, W. Edwards Demings. I think I said it right.
Yeah.
But actually, I had just read it, and I think I'd probably heard it before in some other context, but I had just read this in the brand new book that came out by Dan Heath, which I was just showing you a few minutes ago, was Reset. Mm-hmm. If this came out, I got it the day before I left to go to that meeting. That was the day it actually hit the shelves. And the quote he said was, "Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets." And that is a sobering, painful, joyful, whatever part you're in at that particular moment when that phrase hits you, that's when you realize, wow, or oh my goodness, something's really wrong. But it's just because that's the system you've got in place. And it really starts ringing true when you start looking at your systems, your processes, and you think, why does this keep happening? But it has a lot to do with the fact that you haven't gone back to see where the struggle may be or something along those kind of lines. And maybe something else we were talking about before we got going on. Maybe we'll tip that in a minute too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think I've heard it said multiple ways. And I agree with you. When I read that, you texted to me. I still have the text. I don't think I've ever felt a joyous high and an embarrassed low at the same time as when I read that. And because I immediately said, well, this is why this is working well for me, and that's why this is not working well for me.
Yeah.
Right? And because I'd heard the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, hoping for a different response. We've all heard those. But they just felt like sayings, and it felt like a stick that I could hit somebody over the head with when they were frustrated. It was never at me. It was always a little weapon I could use on somebody else. But this one cut deep, right?
Yeah.
And got straight to the heart of, essentially, it's all my fault, right? If I'm having a great day, it's my fault. If I'm having a rough day, it's my fault. If I lost 15 pounds, it's my fault. If I gained 15 pounds, it's my fault, right? Because it's the system I put into place that got that result.
Yeah, and part of it too. I mean, and you maybe fault's the wrong word. Maybe the fault's the right word. It depends on how you're looking at it.
Sure.
But the results you got were because you did these certain things, and they put you into that frame of mind, that position of time, that just all of the context that it took to get what you got out of it. It's why you can't concentrate when you're holding your phone? Well, because you're holding your phone and you're doing something else with it. So that's it just sets these things in motion. It's the why do I always run late in the office? Well, it's because I spent 2 extra minutes answering an email when I could have just gotten up and gone and seen that guest. Or,
Yeah.
you know, why doesn't anybody ever listen to me? Possibly because every time you've said something before, you've contradicted everything you said before.
Yep.
So, some of those kind of things matter over time, and they start adding up. And these incremental things that we do to ourselves start to affect us.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And the level set, you brought up something. You said, I don't know if fault's the right word. I had a mentor years ago tell me that made me look at why we assign different words different emotional values. And he's like, so fault was one that he used. He said it always seems to be negative, but if you do all the work and the work you put into it got a positive outcome, that's your fault that there was a positive outcome. So fault isn't an emotional word, it's just assigning responsibility and accepting responsibility. And so that's, whenever I use that word, that's the light I use it under, right? It's owning the actions and the outcomes that come from it. So if I'm eating properly and getting my Peloton workouts in, it's my fault that I got healthier.
Right.
If I'm eating pizza and Girl Scout cookies, and I've got way too many young women that live near me, and nieces, so it's a rough month right now on the not on eating well because there's too many Girl Scout cookies, but it's my fault then that I'm off the the health bandwagon.
So so let's say one of these young ladies comes to your door. She's ding dong. I've got these cookies to sell. How could you possibly still make this young lady happy and still keep yourself in good control?
I think it's probably a bad example, Ted, because I've already got my cash ready for the next year. I can't say no to a Girl Scout.
Well, but you can, and you can say yes at the same time. Okay, so let's look at the how many cookies are in that box?
Oh, we're gonna go here.
Not a lot.
Probably more than should be eaten in one sitting.
Probably in more than one sitting, but probably not more than 3.
Yeah,
maybe 5 at the most. And so my thought process on this, where you were going with it, was why don't I just give them the $20?
Yeah.
I don't really need the cookies.
Yeah,
they're good, but
they're good.
Are they that good?
If you had a frozen Thin Mint, Ted.
See, I don't get to have that very often in my house. My wife is not a big fan of chocolate and mint together, so I have to take care of that on my own on occasion. So, like Christmas time for me is great because then I know I can get my hands on some of the Ghirardelli chocolate bark, the peppermint bark.
Peppermint bark, that's good stuff.
That's very good. It's great stuff. And so, especially if the dark chocolate version. So I really, this time of the year, I'm coming back down off of my really bad season right now. I'm getting back into my training weight. I'm almost there, about 2 more pounds, and I'll be right back down at the bottom. But there are things. So let's talk about these kind of things like this. Where was it that you did something amazingly well? It probably wasn't in the averages. It probably was in some other thing that you did that was probably pretty impressive. That was in the system that you had set. And one of the things that Chip and Dan Heath referred back to many years ago in one of their, I think it was actually in Switch, which was their second book. He talked about something called bright spots. And these were things that were kind of buried within the averages. The average doesn't tell you what the problem is. It tells you have a problem, but it doesn't tell you what the problem is. And he had something in there called a bright spot. So, what was it in a bright spot that led to a great result from a review that a guest may have given you about your practice? Or what was a bright spot that helped me to avoid that entire bag of peppermint bark that was there at Christmas? Some looking at some of those kind of things, and if you can see what those things are, you can create the system around that, which then leads to getting the results you want, because every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets.
Yep. You sharing that made me think. I think you were asking hypothetically, what's a result that you got, or how something changed. If anybody were to look at my cell phone, you would freak out because it's full of red circles with numbers in them. Mm-hmm. I think I'm sitting on about 61 unread text messages right now. So if you're listening to this, I apologize. I'll get to them at some point. I realized a few years ago that little device was controlling me. And if a text came in, I had to respond. I noticed that my family would do the same thing, and how that device, the messages coming in, were disrupting our relationships, because that became more important, getting rid of the little red dot. So I recognized, I don't think I had the words for it, but I recognized that message comes in, or I see a red dot, I've got to fix that now, clear the dot, and then I feel, that's my dopamine hit. I've got no unread messages there. So I trained myself to not respond for at least a few hours, unless it was my wife or somebody super important. Right. And what I realized was I was really training myself to look at the phone and not freak out because there were red circles, right? And that it's okay, right? And if it's super an emergency, they'll call me. They'll call me 5 times back to back to back. That's when I know I need to talk to them. But if it's just texting somebody, it's not urgent right now. And but breaking that habit, and so now I can put my phone down and not worry. All right, I've had it down at the house for hours and not looked at it. In fact, during the day when I work, a lot of times I'll put it on Do Not Disturb just so it doesn't bother me, and I'm not worried that I'm missing something in there, because I know that if repeated calls come through it, the Do Not Disturb will get overridden. But the system before was designed to interrupt the relationships I was having with my wife and my kid, or my kids, right? I think I said that right. One wife, multiple kids, my wife and kids. And I was blaming the phone when it was really me and the system that I had built about having to respond right away, and having to undo that changed a lot of how present I can be, whether it's meetings like this with them, whatnot.
There's so many other things we can put into distractions in our life, and one of the other people that you and I are big fans of is John Acuff. Mm-hmm. And he said something recently. I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he said, Netflix really does not want you to be a great business person. They want you to watch. They want you to stay up past midnight. That's what they want. And in fact, that's actually what their CEO recently said, was their biggest competitor is the bed.
Interesting.
That's their biggest competitor. It's not Disney's streaming. It's not Prime. It is sleep. That is their biggest competitor. And they know that. So they're trying to do things that they can't. And I'm not bashing Netflix. I own stock. No. Full disclosure, Netflix. I watch Netflix on a regular basis. But, they don't want you to be a great business person. They just want your eyeballs. The same situation happens with our social media influences and things like that. That their whole goal is to try and keep you attached as best they can. And so we have to have systems that are better than their systems. Otherwise, we're falling into their systems. I mean, it's just a matter of, you're not going to rise to the level of your goal. You're going to fall to the level of your system.
So I'm taking a minute to write down, because you said something that is going to be added to my, John Acuff has his, I'm drawing a blank on it. Soundtracks, thank you. His soundtracks, and I've got a whole notes section app on my phone that has all the different soundtracks. So our systems have to be better than their systems.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So what could you do to build your system to be better than their system?
I found that we can only relate this personally, but for I rarely watch Netflix if I'm not watching a series with either my wife or my kids.
Okay.
Right. So, because then it's not watching TV, it's experiencing something together that we end up talking about and driving a discussion. As opposed to sitting and binge watching. So it's thankfully I don't have. We got past the staying up till past midnight watching shows. There was a point, but now I rarely watch TV without them because it becomes an experience as opposed to just tune off and sit and watch.
And that's great because, I mean, now you've turned this into not just something to burn some time with, but actually something where you can actually bond with some other people over something that they're hoping you're just going to burn some time with.
Yep.
So you figured out a way to break their system, so to speak. One of the things that I decided at the first of the year, I've got to really start working on some other things and doing some things better. Tifton, Georgia, where I live, is the, no joke, reading capital of the world. That's a title.
Really?
We had, yes, it is. There was this thing called accelerated reader that a lot of school systems had gotten into, and what basically happens is you read a book, you take a little quiz on a computer at the library or something like that, and you get these points. And kids would get these points, and they would go to the accelerated reader store, and they would, with their points, buy these things, kind of like the same stuff you would get with skee ball. I mean,
okay.
Think about that kind of stuff. I mean, there were some other, there were better stuff, if they got really good points, but for the most part, it was pencils and erasers and stuff like that. And someone said, hey, it would really be cool if I could do this with my child, to really show them it's important for them. So I'm going to show them how important it is so I can do it too. And so they said, well, could we set up a thing? So there was a summer reading program that came about that adults were actually going to and doing, and they found these books that fit into this framework, and they were actually, the Harry Potter series and all those things fit in there real easily. And Tifton starts accumulating all these points. And we have this program here in Tifton. It's the Tift County Foundation for Educational Excellence. And it's just a nonprofit that helps support our school systems and do some different things. And they were the one that were funding the accelerated reader program. The executive director at the time, a guy named Mike Brumby, said, we got all these parents that are doing this sort of stuff, and I wonder if we could get other people who don't even have kids to come and take these. And sure enough, people do that too. And the next thing you know, they start ratcheting up these points. And we started realizing that Tift County was going to get over 1 million points in a very short span of time because of how many people were doing this sort of thing. And Accelerated Reader got really excited about this, and they decided to do this media piece with it. They came here the day close to when we were going to hit this 1 million point thing. They had everyone come out to our football stadium, which is about a half a mile from here, and we all took a little piece of a Dr. Seuss piece, and we all read it in tandem. We got a Guinness World Record for reading the biggest group of people reading something at the same time together out loud. And Tifton became this thing called the reading capital of the world. Now, I tell this story to tell you that I really don't enjoy reading that much.
Really?
I don't. It's painful for me. I think it's part of just my exotropia, maybe, for all of the optometrists that are listening to us. I get tired very easily, and I am super, super distracted. It does not take much at all for me to be distracted. So it's hard for me to really focus in. So I have to figure out different strategies I can do to sit down and read. And I'm getting to this long drawn out story to get to the part about how systems are important. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about how reading doesn't have to necessarily be reading.
Yep.
I can listen to books on tape. That's what we used to call it. Books on, audibles.
Yep.
But I can also try to find books that tend to interest me a little bit more and figure out ways to do it. I do know that part of my not reading is more really of just I want to say some weakness in character, to be honest with you. For me, to say that I'm so weak that I can't sit down and read a chapter in a book is kind of feeble if you think about it. So I've built myself back up to being able to sit down and read and not just listen. I do get more out of listening. I enjoy it more. I think I've maybe the theater that goes into some of the people who are doing some of the readings really helps a lot for me. But for the most part, I just absorb it more and I can back it up and listen to it again. And whereas if I'm reading, I'm having to underline things and really pay attention that way. But some things that have helped out with that is the book club you guys are doing. Mike Rothschild's doing a book club with a bunch of the administrators from Vision Source right now, which is really helping. And also just getting to meet some of these authors personally, which is kind of fun and exciting. Also
really
gets
cool.
you really interested in doing it. But when you're doing this, the danger is you start learning things about yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where we're going back to this quote again. So, the results I was getting with my reading had a lot to do with the system of how my reading was. I didn't have a plan. My plan was, hey, I need to read some more. And that was it.
Yeah.
There was no system in place. So at the beginning of the year, I decided, I got to stop watching as much fluff as I do. I need to start doing, if I'm going to watch something, it needs to be something that's meaningful and helpful, or like you, it's involving Kristen and me watching it together. If it's not going to be something that she's going to be doing, then I need to be going back and watching a lot of I'm in the Guaranteed Goals community that John Acuff has, and he's got a lot of videos in there. It's watching that stuff. So I've been going through his coaching sessions starting back in 2023 and working my way forward through, because I'm not always available when he does those live. And the things that I'm learning are very helpful. It's feeding me. It's not just wasting my time. And I feel more relaxed now too. A lot of the things that I get into when I'm just, burning time on one of the different streaming things don't really fulfill you, and you don't leave with your tank full. It's more just wasted time, and I really feel almost sometimes more tired
After the fact.
after the fact. Yeah. Whereas if I've gone into, now my goal on reading is like, I got a goal every day that I'm reading 5 pages.
Cool.
5 pages. I just got to read 5 pages each day. Or actually what I did was 5 pages, 4 to 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
If I can do that, then it's a huge win for me. And what I found is that some days it's more than, easily more, maybe 15, and I mean, these books aren't that difficult to read. They're not like it's not like How to Build a Brain. It's just, things about business and stuff like that. But to be able to sit down and muster the discipline to read 5 pages a day is not that difficult. And once you do it, you start realizing, wow, this is doable. That's really what a bright spot is. It's because it was done before. I was able to ignore that brownie. I was able to, coach my team. I was able to sit down and read 5 pages without, putting myself into a distracting situation. Yeah.
The Myopia Collective. Cooper Vision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being.
Well, those are the small...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yep.
I was just going to say, those are the John talks about as different goals, right? Those are those small goals that just take 1 or 2 minutes, right? It's not this big bite of the elephant, right? It's just that small, I'm going to grab the spoon. I'm going to sit down and read 5 pages, right? And if all it is 5 pages and it was painful that day, you did it. But the majority of the time, you probably, once you sit, you find that you 1 or 2 more pages finishes the chapter. At least that's what happens to me, right? So it ends up being 7, 8, 9, maybe 10, to what your point.
And what I try to do also is I try to start stealing time for myself. Meaning, if I can, much like you were saying earlier, for me, it's more the email is my problem. That's where I get sucked into the vortex. Or the hairball, or whatever you want to call it. And for me, if I go back to my office and I open my computer and I sit down and look at email, I can go through, 15 or 20 Budocs emails, or I can sit down and just put stuff in different folders or delete it or whatever. The next thing I know, I've wasted 15 minutes, really gave me nothing other than a couple of meaningful things I got out of a Budoc email, maybe. But a lot of the stuff sometimes might not have really pertained to anything I was doing. It was just reading through, oh, that's great, click, save, that sort of thing. Whereas if I can sit down, I know I got 5 minutes, I can read 3 or 4 pages, in 5 minutes or so. Or I can make notes from what I read when I was between that last guest. What was it that was really meaningful? The thing I think that I also have learned with books is I don't have to pull out 900 different awesome things out of a book. Just one. That's all you really need out of a book. And if you get that one thing, it made it worth it. Gosh, I sound like I made all these wonderful discoveries, and this is probably everybody in there is going, oh, God, how stupid is Ted? He's just now figuring this out.
No, not at all. It's in the systems to put in place, right? Because I don't think I read a single book in high school, right? My English teachers don't listen to this, but I would admit it to them now. I was really good at regurgitating the information back in a paper, so they all thought I read the book. And Cliff's notes at the time were amazing. Right?
Or they thought you read the book.
Hey, I got an A. That's all that mattered.
Okay.
Until I got to college and they realized I couldn't write, and they promised me that I would pass the class if I didn't take any more English classes through San Diego State, and I said yes. And now I find myself in opportunities to write a whole lot more than I ever thought. But for me, it was I wanted to get the full picture and then jump in, and so books moved too slow to try to understand what I was wanting to get out of it. So my system on reading, especially the books that we do for the book club and that I want to get stuff out of, is I'll listen to the Blinkist first. It's a fantastic app. So I'll download the Blinkist and just basically get a huge overview of what am I going to get into, right? And then typically, so I paid for an Audible subscription, but I'll usually buy the Audible and the book at the same time, so I can listen to it when I'm in the car, then I'll go back and read it, and I'll usually pick up a couple different things. And I love gadgets, so my latest toy is the Kindle Scribe, because I can read and write and mark up in the book. And if it's just an opportunity where I want to read something stupid, a James Patterson, I can pull a James Patterson book up and tune off. If it's something I really want to get into, then I can have all my notes, and then I can go back and review the notes. But that system for me may not work for everybody. For me, it's really helped me get a lot out of it. And then the last piece is when I find something I like, I have to share it with somebody. A quick text. That way I'm not just the Dead Sea collecting all the water, right? I'm re-putting it back out, and in putting it back out, it makes it more meaningful for me. I think it makes me look smarter to whoever I'm sending it to, too. Because if I said I read it in a book, right, you always look smarter, but sharing it helps me to retain it a whole lot more.
So what kind of things are you doing to create and share more ideas?
I've got a couple different friend groups, text groups that all just, hey, I read this. It's cool, right? And I saw this. I try to work it into different discussions, especially planned discussions. So I'll try to find quotes and put things into different places. My kids, unfortunately, now are the receivers of a lot of this, and teenagers are not very accepting of a quote that I read in a book. I'm trying to be less, put less weight on them. In emails to my team, I try to put in, sprinkle it with some different things and quote it back to the authors, which surprisingly has started some cool conversations because they've then asked, well, how do you get into this? How do you start pulling all these different things? What books do you have? And so I've loaned them different books that I've read. But I think it was just doing it, right? Just sending something to someone saying, hey, this is a cool quote. Thought you'd like it.
Yeah. I would love to attribute this to somebody too, but I don't know if I heard it, if I thought it, or let's face it, there's no such thing as original thought. I mean, let's be honest with you. You are always influenced somehow by somebody. But an idea is really useless unless you share it. Mm-hmm. And the thing you were talking about earlier when you said, how important it is for you to take that information you're learning and then put it back out there. It's so powerful once you share it with somebody else. Just like you were saying, purposely, because it helps you retain it better, because if you can teach it, you really understand it. But, to watch how they can take that idea and maybe even change it a little bit, and what they've done with that idea is what's really exciting, I think, because you get to see that idea in action and actually evolve over time, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's fun to see things grow. I mean, especially as entrepreneurs, that's what we do, right? We build,
right,
and we watch things grow, and hopefully there's only a handful of plants that and ideas that die on the vine, but the rest of it all flourishes really well. I think the other neat thing about understanding the systems and putting into place, because we're talking about a bunch of those systems, and really it gives us a chance to manipulate the outcomes, right? And I use the word manipulate on purpose because it gives us the control, right? If I want to get to a certain place, I can focus on all the different pieces that'll get me there. It may not be comfortable all the time, right? And you may have to force yourself to read 5 pages, and but you get to decide where you end up on this choose your own adventure thing called life, right? Because you can pull the different levers within the system that you want.
Right.
So you got a thought?
No, I was just what are the things that really start you on a journey for any particular new thought that goes into play? How do you get yourself to that place? How do you get the new ideas? Where do you get the new ideas? That sort of thing. I mean, what's that process look like for you?
Honestly, I think much to sometimes my family's frustration and my team's. I mean, we're optometrists. We went to school. We paid a lot of money to be taught to look for problems and solve them. And so by nature, we're professional problem solvers. And most of them revolve around the eye, but that's how we're designed, how our nature. And so I think I look around just looking for, it sounds bad, negative, but looking for problems, but just looking for things to improve. How do I make that better? Right. And then having done it, addressed it wrong way too many times, mostly by critiquing what I thought was wrong about it, and instead of taking it apart, fully understanding how to build it back up, and then make the end product better. just trial and error. So I now, when I see something that's a challenge, I'll make a note of it, and slowly trying to, thanks to Lori Sorensen advice, whole-ass one thing and not half-ass two things. So finding the most important problems to work on, but systematically breaking it apart, bringing in the people that are involved. If it's something at home, it's at home. If it's a personal thing, finding the right person to coach and mentor. If it's at the office, bringing in the right employees that are involved in that process to just help us dismantle it, evaluate it, and then build it back up. But giving us the time frame to do so. So this year, I don't know if I shared this with you, but as much as I love John and the word goals, this year I don't have a single goal, right? This year I'm building systems, which if you really understand John's, all it takes is a goal, it's a system. He talks about systems, right? And because I don't want to focus on where I want to, just on what I want to get to, I want to focus on the process that gets us there so that it's repeatable, and then I can scale it over the next couple of years, and everybody wins.
I think you're still in a goal process with this a little bit still. I mean, your goal is obviously to set some great systems.
Well, my goal is to rate systems, but it's not. I took away the numbers, right? So for the office, I don't have a dollar amount that I want to hit the year on. I don't have a percentage growth. I want to go back and look at when a patient comes in and we diagnose them with glaucoma or glaucoma suspect, what does that system look like? Mm-hmm. What does every single visit look like? What are we going to do? How it is? What's the cadence of it? What are the tests that we're going to run? And of course, there's outliers, but for the most part, this is how we're going to run it. And I think that instead of saying, hey, I need to run more visual field tests, I now have a better system that's going to give me the outcome that I want. So instead of just focusing on, I need to get my visual field test numbers up, I need to take better care of people, and this is the steps that everybody's going to follow to get it. And because we did all the steps right, the numbers are going to, the outcomes are going to be there without trying to force them.
What kind of things are you doing to allow for input from your team?
I'm having them be in charge of building the systems. So I worked with Chris and Kyle on their comprehensive optometry system. They're building pillars, what they call it. And so I assigned different key people the job of collecting that information and putting it down, and then we pull it up and collect it as a team. We try to break it as much as we're trying to build it. Right. Gotcha. So let's try to find the holes in this. Let's try to find where the bottlenecks are. Things might not work. That way it's a true system and not just a feel good. And there's some tough conversations. This is my favorite go-to medicine. Well, this is my favorite go-to medicine. Well, we got to align on them. That way everybody knows what you're going to do first. What cadence do you put things into? What do you not do that visit? Because as optometrists, we try to do everything to everyone all the time.
Right.
And so how do we explain that? What words do we use? What education do we share with them? When do we do all that? But if you can break it down so it's very systematized, it's actually freeing for the rest of the team. And so I've realized, thanks to the help of some colleagues, I think you were one of those, that I'm the worst person to develop those systems. So as CEO, my job is to make sure they get done and provide the support they need, so that they stay on the timeline for when we want to meet the deadlines in this development process. But it's the journey that I'm focused on, and they're all keenly involved.
So what's the benefit for them, though?
Well, for them, a lot of times we're asking them we do too much testing. I bought too many toys, and we just do too much testing, and they don't understand the why behind it. I've got 4 different doctors that all want to do things slightly differently, and that can be confusing for them. Mm-hmm. Some want to see a patient back on one cadence, some want to see them back on a different cadence. If we're using medicines that require prior auths, it's nice to know exactly when that's going to happen, so they can be emotionally and physically prepared for that. Yep. And they're delivering the care as much as we are. So if they're not involved in it, this is a job. Right. If they're involved in it, they're now part of the care team.
So it's basically creating a lot of autonomy for them, some authority for them, and some ownership for sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's definitely building that sort of thing for them. I would also argue it's making your practice more valuable to them. It's going to make you a lot less likely to have a salary shopper,
Oh, for sure.
you know, because they're not going to get that everywhere else. They're just not.
Yep. And I've also learned that I've got a ton of blind spots that I wasn't aware of. And when I came in saying this is what we're going to do, they weren't comfortable challenging back. So I think it was Brianna Rue that shared with me the hippo principle, right? The highest paid person in the room. When they talk, everybody else gets silenced.
Right.
And so by having them come and share ideas and them building the structures and bringing it back to me, I'm giving them an opportunity to really show, highlight what their skill set is, what their perspectives are, what their insights are, challenging some of the status quo. So the outcome is better than if I were to create it on my own.
Yeah. One of the other things that we've done in our office too, or I mean, really probably is more directly for me, is in order to hopefully get better results of my team, to your point, I'm trying not to give any advice as much as possible. I am trying to ask a lot of questions, and advice is basically the last resort, not the first option. Where I hopefully am getting them to think through this process, and the nice thing about it is them thinking through some of these processes are unlocking some things I would have never thought of doing before. Sometimes there was a reason why, but most of the time it was because what they are seeing it from a much different perspective than what I see it from. And just that moment of brilliance that they have, and then being able to tell them, this is amazing. I'm so excited that you thought this up, because I had never figured this out this way before. I was having a discussion with another group earlier at lunch today, the leadership group that Mike is doing, and Rothschild, and he didn't say it right, excuse me. My dear friend and idol, Mike Rothschild, a great American. He basically, we were talking about some of the things that we're doing in our office, and my scribe came up with a great process. I mean, it's not rocket science to figure this out, but she did it, and it was way better than I would have done it. The question came about, well, how do you handle pre-appointing in your office? And specifically, this probably is more strong on when we're doing medical pre-appoints and things like that. But so she's sitting, back to my left, typically in the exam room, and I'm talking to the guest and explaining to them what's going on with their eyes and the challenge that they're having with their glaucoma. And, we need to make sure we're continuing to keep that pressure down like we are. You're doing a great job with your eye pressure, with your drops, and, to make sure we're taking care of everything. We're going to see you back in 6 months. We're going to run some tests, make sure your peripheral vision is doing like it's supposed to do, and make sure there's not any more damage to the structure of the retina. And while I'm saying that, Samantha is typing away in the computer. She's making the appointment, and I literally just reach my hand back. She puts a card in my hand, and I go, and here's your visit in 6 months to see us back. Wow. That wasn't my idea. That was Samantha's. She says, well, why don't I just appoint them while I'm in the room and fill out the card and hand it to you right there? That way you can just give it to them right now. And what we were having, back to the system, the results we were getting was, I would circle something on a piece of paper, hand it to my optician. She would take them up front. They would appoint the things, and my handwriting is impeccable. And they, instead of coming back for an OCT for the optic nerve, they would come back for an OCT of the macula, or they just missed putting in photos or something like that. And they'd come back in, and I would be frustrated because they didn't do these things, or instead of having medical photos, because that's really what needed to be done because this patient has diabetic retinopathy, they just did an Optimap. Yeah. And, that was a difference in fee, and it was actually something that needed to be done. So now I've got to go through that thought process in my head. It's frustrating. That slows me down. The system was perfectly designed to get the results I was getting.
Yeah.
And Samantha figured out a better system, and it works so much better now.
Yep. It's and I love that quote for exactly this reason, right? It's when you understand the process and how the sausage is made and why the outcomes you get are the outcomes you get, you're free to change it.
Yeah.
You're no longer a victim.
Right.
And you're subject to the whims of whatever. So I think that's genius. And I've seen my team come up with stuff that just blows me away. My son works for me, and I said, your chief complaints are the best I've ever seen, and you're not a writer, right? English is not your deal, bud. Mm-hmm. He goes, well, yeah, ChatGPT's not HIPAA compliant, so I don't put any names in there, but I basically just type in real quick I say, write me a chief complaint, and type in the few key things of what they're complaining, and it comes up beautifully. I just copy and paste that into your chart, and you think I'm a genius.
Nice.
And he goes, that's faster than if I were to try to type it myself. Right? And now it looks smart and flowy.
Yeah.
Little things that come up. He showed me how to use it to respond to patients that were upset. Right? So my normal response would have been me and a little bit of confrontational. Right? I'm going to be defensive of myself and my team and my practice. He's like, no, just put it in ChatGPT and say, hey, make this sound nice. Still write what you want. Watch it, change the tone. Just use the tools you have. If you're not cheating, you're not trying, is what he said. But it makes sense, right? I was getting the outcome, and I got the response back from patients that you would expect if I'm being a little bit combative, right, and defensive. Right. Instead, I had people write back and were like, that was the nicest email I've ever received. And so just using different systems, using different tools, being aware of the opportunities that we have to just make things better.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, very cool. Well, Ted, I really appreciate when you shared that with me, and it had an impact even when I was in pain. So it sat through. I talked to a friend of mine who does outside our industry. He created software to help manage sign companies. So he owned a sign company. They make all the Ruth's Chris signs across the country. So if you've ever seen a Ruth's Chris sign, he made it. And but he created software to help the companies. And I said, what's the biggest problem? And he goes, dude, they all have systems, but their systems all suck. And I said, what do you mean they all have systems? And he goes, well, not having a system is a system. They do things the same way every time. They're just usually really bad at it. So all I did is create a way to help them change their system so that they got the outcomes that they were looking for, and they paid me a lot of money to do that. So that's kind of insightful. Yeah. So I shared that with him, and he loved it. I think he's going to put it up on his wall.
Very good.
Yep. So appreciate it. Appreciate the insights, and you could have fooled me by not loving to read, because you always have great recommendations. And every time I talk to you, you cost me more money in books. So thank you.
Audible. It's Audible. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff. All right. Thanks, Ted.
My pleasure. Had a blast.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and our YouTube channel, both linked in the show notes. Now, here's something exciting. We're giving away a 1-year subscription to Comprehensive Optometry Simplified. All you have to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, and email it to me at questions@icodeeducation.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll be selecting a winner on December 15th, so don't miss your chance to get access to this valuable resource. Thanks again for listening. I can't wait to see your reviews.